Hi, I'm Shaul. A century ago, in 1925, the Bauhaus School of Design was established in Düsseldorf, Germany. There is a conflict between a tool as an object, as a tool, or a functional piece of machinery that is supposed to complete a certain function. Until 1925, the decorative or ornamental value of tools had a strong impact on its design. But the Bauhaus school introduced revolutionized thinking where form should follow the function. That brings to mind two pieces of photographic kit introduced recently. The first one is the new Fujifilm GFX 100 RF. It's a small portable camera with a fixed 35 millimeter length that is medium format with quite a dense sensor of 102 megapixels. Looking at the camera, I think that portability was the main reason for making it. It's perhaps the first time in digital where medium format was compacted into a small portable package that allows you to use it on the fly in genres such as documentary, social, street. However, looking at the sensor of this camera, it is a full-fledged medium format sensor. Such sensors are made for commercial photography, for heavy cropping, and for maximizing the dynamic range and the color fidelity of the images produced. It supports 16-bit RAW, and its pixel pitch is about 3.7 or 3.8 microns, which is a tiny pixel pitch. It really requires high resolving power optics. Medium format sensors call for interchangeable lenses. The whole shooting environment is highly controlled by lighting, by using steady tripods, and by carefully planning the resulting images. Documentary cameras call for lower density sensors that allow for a high tolerance to movement, to camera shake, and for allowing a more lax optical design that would allow for more true-to-life rendition of the image. What we got in the GFX 100 RF is a hybrid, and that hybrid is suitable for none of those two very different applications. On paper, it can produce high precision documentary photography, which would allow for serious, aggressive cropping to optimize the composition. But this is not the case in this genre. In documentary photography, you rarely crop. You want to include as much context as possible while still keeping your subject a prominent part of the photograph. Color fidelity or dynamic range are not really an issue there, because this type of photography is centered mainly around the subject and its surrounding. To freeze the action and obtain really highly detailed results, you need to think of camera shape. You need to stabilize the body and obtain high shutter speed in order to freeze motion. But alas, this camera does not have any kind of stabilization, and the lens itself is quite slow. It's only f4, which is very suitable for documentary photography, because the depth of field is large, and everything would look sharp in the image. But it would affect the shutter speed, or you would have to really raise the ISO value, which would aggressively hurt the dynamic range and color fidelity of that excellent sensor. Is this camera suitable for achieving the photographer's goals in documentary photography? Yes, of course it is. But is it the best design for that? I'm not sure. I think that its smaller brethren, the Fujifilm X100 series cameras, are at least as suitable. They would create images that are about the same, unless you're shooting in very good light conditions. The Leica Q series, which is a series of fixed lens, smallish cameras that are also made for the same purposes, have an equivalent wider aperture, and they would work better in dim lighting conditions. There's also a plethora of mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras that would achieve perhaps better results with a suitable lens. For example, the setup filming me now is a Nikon ZF with a Thypoc 28mm f1.4. This setup can achieve, I would argue, a little bit better results in those genres of photography than the Fujifilm GFX 100 RF, because it has stabilization, it has a wider aperture lens. I think that the value of the Fujifilm GFX 100 RF is mainly as an object in itself. It's a beautiful camera. It's smallish, stylish, and it is made to be shown off. It is made to attest on its owner. When you pay those $5,000 or so for a camera like this, what you buy is not a tool to make better photos that are impossible to achieve with a more humble setup. You are paying for the bragging rights of carrying and displaying such a beautiful object, such that is a tool, but it is also an ornament in itself. A vast portion of the camera market actually cares about those things. I care about that too, I must admit. Photography is an artistic, a creative endeavor, and the experience, the social aspects of being engaged in this pastime are as important as the results, the images you obtain. So despite the problematic design decisions, it's a camera I covet. I would really like to add it to my collection because basically it fits the type of photography I like to do. It's a good documentary tool. There are two reasons why I will not buy this camera. The first one is its price. It's clearly out of my budget, and I would never dream of spending so much money on a photographic tool. I don't do professional photography. It would never pay for itself. The second reason I would never buy such a camera is the file sizes and the computing power required to edit those files. That means that a camera like this would require me to purchase a new computer, which is I'm highly reluctant to do. I generally do not crop my images, so such a high pixel density is not a requirement from my perspective. On the contrary, I quite like those low density sensors that allow me to use optics that I like better, make it possible to obtain more true-to-life results that are important to me, but I think more generally they are required for documentary photography of living things, of people. Those lenses let the world come through in a more truthful, natural way than high resolving power, ED glass full lenses required to resolve such high density sensors. The second piece of kit I would like to discuss in the context of design and function is the Viltrox 135mm f1.8 lab lens. But that is only a case in point that represents the whole industry of those fine 135 portrait lenses with fast maximum apertures. Every camera manufacturer offers such a lens. Usually those lenses are quite lucrative and sell for a high price. However, that Viltrox lens lets you obtain very similar results for a much lower price. And this is what makes it so attractive to many photographers. 135 is a focal length that is quite restrictive. Its use cases are limited to portrait photography and maybe some telephoto applications like wildlife or sports. But I would like to argue that the relatively short focal length does not really allow you enough flexibility for those genres. You would be better served by a zoom lens, both for wildlife and sports. When you do sports or wildlife, the camera is mostly stationary. You do not move it, but you do try to focus on moving subject. To frame an image correctly in those circumstances, a zoom lens would go a long way. The fast aperture of f1.8 allows you to really obliterate any background, to eliminate any context from the composition. But let me tell you a secret. A shallow depth of field is an intrinsic property of all telephoto lenses. A 135mm lens, f1.8 aperture, would have a depth of field of only about 2 centimeters, which is really too shallow for a good portrait if you want the whole face to be contained in the depth of field. With an adult subject, the distance between the tip of the nose and the backs of the ears is about 7 centimeters or 3 inches. Such a depth of field is only obtainable if you stop down to about f10. So the consideration in making a portrait is how much would be in focus, or how much would be sharp, not how unsharp would the background be. My rule of thumb is that to get a mostly blurred image, you need a physical aperture of more than around 30 millimeters. That can be obtained at f4.5 for a 135 millimeter focal length. So arguably wider apertures are not really necessary in such lenses, especially if light conditions are good. And since portrait photography deals with slow movement of the subject and basically well-controlled lighting conditions, you can achieve a satisfactory result with even a much smaller aperture. Added to that, those new modern 135 lenses contain a lot of ED glass in order to resolve the whole potential of high density sensors, and that makes the image flat and clinical, and the subjects look a little bit unnatural, as if they were cardboard cutouts pasted in front of a large field of nothing, of obliterated context. Portrait photography calls for a completely different philosophy of lens design in order to create a true-to-life representation of curvature that allows you to preserve the perception of volume and weight in your subject. You need a much simpler lens without much ED glass. Of course, with longer focal length, you would need some suppression of dispersion, but maybe one ED element at the front of the lens would achieve that. Lenses with such a design have not been made for many years. This is a 135 lens from the 80s. It's a small East German lens. The Carl Zeiss Sienna 135 f3.5. And look how small and light it is. It's not even 400 grams in weight. And it makes beautiful images. Now, if you calculate the physical aperture when it's wide open, it's about 38 to 39 millimeters, which is plenty. It's much more than enough for really obliterating the background. In fact, you have to stop it down quite a bit in order to make a decent portrait where both eyes are in focus. This lens has a classic zonar design. It's 7 elements in 3 groups, and of course none of them are made of ED glass. And it renders beautifully. It's really an art lens, something that is quite unusual these days. Mainly, it renders the true-to-life nature of the world. Look at the following image, for example. You can see that the depth of field is very narrow. It's only a few centimeters thick. But look at the curvature, the representation of volume in those lemons, and that the blurry, really difficult to discern shape of the leaves behind it. A 135 lens is not something I regularly use. I have used this lens only a few times since purchasing it used about 3 years ago. I doubt if anyone uses this type of lenses on a regular basis. Perhaps if you're a professional fashion or portrait photographer, maybe concert photographer, you might find it more useful. But when I do use it, I really like the results. It's one of the most artistic lenses that I own. They can really isolate an object from a considerable distance and show its whole glory with a very selective context. I don't really know how much I paid for this lens because I bought it in a bundle with other Carl Zeiss Sienna lenses. But I expect that it would not cost more than 50, maybe $60 on the used market on its own. Alas, no such lenses to be found anywhere these days. Nothing with autofocus anyway. The photographic industry is full of examples where the design does not follow function in a very compelling way, where you have to really make a lot of small or even large compromises. I think that in order to thrive in such a competitive market, camera manufacturers have to put more thought, more intention into the design choices and strive to create tools that are perfectly suited to maybe a small segment of the market. Actually, the Fujifilm X100 series is a good example for that. Despite Fujifilm's love affair with high-density sensors that really compromise the rendition of the new lenses, they have been committed to designing tools that fit the intended applications in the best manner possible. And I truly admire them for that. Okay, that will be all for today. Thank you for watching and see you again soon.